Welcome to the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada's final video on the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. We hope you enjoyed this content. Thank you very much.
It's one of the largest regions of the world. We've got 640 million people spread across 11 countries, 10 within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and then East Timor. This is a region that has a lot of demographic advantages. It's young. There's a growing middle class. As an economic bloc, it's already the 5th or 6th largest in the world, depending on how we count. It is overwhelmingly young, with the exception of mature economies like Singapore. That means a growing labor force. It means, as the countries develop economically, a growing middle class, a growing consumer class. So this is a ready market for Canada, but it is also increasingly a supply of a lot of highly skilled labor.
So when we look at ASEAN's role in terms of regional integration within the region, what we've seen over the past 5 or 6 years is really a weakening of its institutional cohesiveness. Smaller members of ASEAN have not worked with the larger members of ASEAN on particular issues, for example, sovereignty issues in the South China Sea.
I think that we've all known that ASEAN for many years has not been necessarily a perfect form, and I think there are many out there who do make some fair criticisms of its effectiveness. That being said, I think it is worth repeating that ASEAN is really the only car to drive from the political security perspective in East Asia.
Canada has worked with ASEAN in many different capacities, mostly in the areas of non-traditional security cooperation, but also in the areas of vaccination, provision of education, and there's a growing role for Canada to engage in defense cooperation with ASEAN countries.
So ASEAN is really the underplayed or under-noticed player that's rising fast. So for Canada, it's really time to up the game on ASEAN and all Southeast Asian countries.
Although China is a very important market for Canadian companies, and particularly those that are choosing to locate in Asia, I think Vietnam and other countries in ASEAN are much easier to enter than China.
Canada has large Southeast Asian diasporas that are underutilized in terms of economic partnerships. Indonesia jumps out as the 4th largest country in the world with well over 200 million people, also a very young country with a growing middle class, incredible economic potential. Other countries like the Philippines and Vietnam have around 100 million people. These are large countries with rapidly growing economies that Canada doesn't engage with as much as it could.
Up to now, what we've seen is Canada's position has been really challenged within the region because of perceived lack of commitment to the region and a lack of attachment to the region. And these are the 2 areas that I think Canada needs to be more effective at articulating itself and its raison d'etre for the region.
I think what we can say is that consistently Canada has a good reputation in Southeast Asia, but it's a conditional good reputation. You'll hear many people, again, rightly or wrongly, saying that Canada has not been consistently present in the region. Southeast Asian countries are often very strategic in making their foreign policy decisions, and I think the more Canada can show a recognition of the very difficult position that Southeast Asian countries find themselves in, the more nuanced Canada's approach to Southeast Asia can be, the more welcome the reception will be as well.
I would say that now more than ever, Canada should be looking at ASEAN, especially in the uncertainty of these times concerning the Trump administration on tariffs.
Australia and New Zealand have also signed a region-wide free trade agreement with ASEAN, and the blueprints for that are important lessons for Canada. ASEAN as an organization is complicated to deal with in many respects. I know there are ongoing discussions with the Australians about how they manage to navigate that relationship. Those should continue.
I think that Australia and New Zealand are the natural allies for Canada. in Asia, and I think we should be really moving in lockstep with them. Both of those countries really recognize the importance of Asia. They both have very extensive networks in Asia.
Domestically, I think the Canadian government can communicate more effectively to the Canadian population how important this region actually is. I think very few Canadians are aware that Southeast Asia has over 600 million people. Very few Canadians are aware that Southeast Asia can be a really important part of Canada's diversification strategy. Obviously, the relationship with the United States has been complicated over the past few years. Europe is a mature market. It has potential, but limited potential for growth with Canada. China has been complicated. Southeast Asia has shown itself to be very robust to the trade tensions between the United States and Canada, and is in many ways a very natural partner for Canada to engage in its efforts to diversify its foreign engagement.